Hi everyone, it's Stephen here, and this is an unusual one because I received a question about arrays in processing. And I love processing. It's one of those wonderful tools that lets you create very beautiful stuff in code very quickly. But a lot of people, when they're learning processing, what they're really learning, or what their professors are trying to teach them, is usually introductory programming so that they can do the cool graphic stuff later on, be that, sound stuff or visual stuff, whatever it is. So a lot of people get sort of hung up on how to do things in processing, where really what they're learning is how to do some introductory Java, sort of first semester Java stuff. So the question I received was about arrays, and I'm actually going to not focus on processing, even though I'm using processing as my editor. I'm going to talk about arrays. Now, hopefully you can hear me typing and everything. This is live. I'm typing in the code. I'm explaining it as I go. That can be hard when you're not used to it, if you're just used to seeing slides and going away and typing it into a code editor. I really encourage you to watch this video, pause it when I type something in, type it into processing yourself, test it when I test it, make sure it's working for you, because if you have even a small error, one character wrong, it can mean the program doesn't work, and it can get very frustrating. The difference between watching this video and actually being able to get a tutorial from me in a lecture room is that you can put up your hand and ask a question when something doesn't work on your laptop in the lecture. Whereas here, you just have to send me an email. So it's not ideal for learning to code, but it's better than nothing. So let's talk about arrays. And I assume you know a little bit of coding, but arrays is something you've just hit. So if I want to think about arrays, it's like a list of items. So I might say I have a list of numbers, and this is the list of numbers here. And usually if someone gives you a list of numbers, they say my numbers are 1, 3, 6, 7, 2. In coding, we might, and in maths, we might put a comma between each item, and then the last item we don't have to have a comma, but there could be more items coming later on, we don't know. And that's a list is an array. It's a very simple list starting at an index and going towards the end. So what is an index? Well, an index is the address of the item I'm looking. So we start at 0, and it goes 1, 2, it goes up in single numbers until it hits the very end of the item. And I'm going to describe that as the length of the array. So the entire length of the array could be, say, 100 items. And that means that our index will start at 0 and go to 99. So that means it's length minus 1. Now, that's very confusing at first. Why is it length minus 1? Well, if your array has 100 slots in it for items, that means your list is 100 items long. Well, if our first item is index 0, our last item must be the total number of items minus 1. That's the length minus 1. So that's 99, even though that's the 100th item. But if you learn that simple rule, it's very easy to find any item in the array. In fact, you can make a loop which looks at every item in the array, and that's kind of important. So to create an array, we have to use a special syntax. And whenever you see square brackets in processing or Java, that's telling you probably this is to do with an array. So we're going to use an integer array. So we write int. Then we use the 2 empty square brackets saying this is a list of integers. We give it a name. In this case, I'm going to call it numbers because I'm not very original. And I'm going to make it equal to, and I'm going to use a curly bracket notation, and then I'm going to put the numbers we had originally. And I'm going to close the curly bracket notation and a semicolon. So what this line of code does is it says, reading it from left to right, I want an array of integers. I want it called numbers. That's how I will address it in future. Set it equal to at the beginning, curly bracket notation, the following values, 1, 3, 6, 7, 2. So that initializes numbers to have all those values. And what that's done for me is this one line of code has created a variable which is actually a list of smaller variables, which is 1, 3, 6, 7, and 2. Now I can start analyzing this, but before I do it, I want to print it out and make sure that all the values are there. So if you've been doing a little bit of processing, you might know the command print line, and we might pass in numbers. That's a natural thing to do. And let's run this code. I'm going to hit run here, and then we'll go up here and we have 1, 3, 6, 7, and 2. But notice I have square brackets with 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 beforehand. So why do I have that? Well, this is telling me that at index 0, I will find the value 1. And that's correct because index 0 is the first one and the first one is 1. In position number 1, I'll find 3. There's position number 1, I'll find 3. Again, 0 and 1 are different, even though we might refer to the first item and expect it to be 1. No, the first item is 0 index and the value is 1. So we have the difference between an index and a value at that position of the index. So if someone says, what is the value in the last index? The last index in this case is, well, let's count them. We have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the last index is 4. We could have worked this out by looking at the total number of items, which was 5, and subtracting 1 to get 4. So if someone said, what's the value in the last index, they really mean look in the last position and find out what's hiding in there, and we see that it's 2. Okay, so knowing the difference between the index of an array and the value located in the index of the array is critical. And once you understand that, it gets a little bit easier to work with. So I'm going to take away this comment, and I'm actually going to comment this out because I've tested it and I don't need it right now. Now I want to write a small little piece of code that will check if there's a particular value in the array. So let's work out what I want to do. Let's scan through an array called numbers and check, oh sorry, I can't spell. Good job I can code because I'll never get a job spelling. And check if value, and let's pick a value. Let's pick the value 6 is in array. Okay, so there's lots of different ways to look at every single value in an array. Okay, but you know, I'm going to use a loop because it's something I have to do several times. Now, I like to use a for loop for this, but you can use a do while loop or a while loop if you prefer, but I'm going to use a for loop. So to look at every item in an array, I would say for, create an index variable. So I'm going to say int index is equal to the first item, 0, and the index goes up to the number of items in the array, but no more. So you'll notice when I say index less than numbers.length, and because we're an integer, we can't go up by decimal fractions, so we're going up by 1 each time. So what will happen is we'll go up, we'll start at 0, then we'll go up to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now at this point, 4 is 1 less than numbers.length, which is 5. But I said keep going while we're less than, not less than or equal to. So that's actually exactly what we want. That will stop. So if you're not too familiar with for loops, they're really useful, and I've used I there and I should have used index. They're really useful. What this gives us is the ability to say start a variable called index at 0 while index is less than numbers.length. Go up by 1 each time. That's going to be very, very useful in an array because it'll start at 0, go up until it reaches the last item, and go up by 1 each time. So in here we can use an if to check the value. So we'll say if in the array numbers in position index, if that is equal exactly to the value we are looking for, then we need to print out a message. And we will print out found 6 at index. Okay. Now we picked 6 arbitrarily. I picked it because I knew it was at position 0, 1, 2. but that could be any value. But let's test it as it is so far. So it prints out found 6 at index 2, which is the correct answer. So let's analyze what we have here before we go on. We have really two parts to this. The for loop, which looks at every item in turn, and an if statement, which analyzes the current item we're on and checks if it happens to be equal to 6. Now this is going to be running through every item in the array, and imagine this array had 1,000,000 items in it. It would still run very fast, but it'd have to check a lot more items. Now on a modern computer you won't notice how long that takes, but I want you to think about it in what's happening each time. For every single item we have to check if it matches the value we're looking for, and if it does print out the result. So because we don't stop it once it finds the result, it continues on to check the next item and the next item. So we could actually put 6 in several places, and now when we run, we'll get the message 6 found at index 1, 6 found at index 2, 6 found at index 4. Now, we weren't asked, to print out that result, but that's what I wanted to do. But what if I just wanted to know that it appeared somewhere in the array? I don't want to know how many times. I don't want to know where. I just want to know it appears somewhere in the array. So I could do that by using a Boolean. So I could say Boolean found value equal to false. So we start off saying we have not found the value we want. Down here, we would change this to say if we found the 6, the value we want, found value is true. And up here we're leaving the array with all the numbers in it, okay? But down here we print out found 6 inside array plus that. So we expect it to say that it did find a 6 inside the array, but it only prints it out once instead of 3 times. Because remember, we're only interested, did it appear, not how many times it appeared. Now let's change our array. And you'll notice that now there are no 6s in our array. So now when we run our code, we expect to get a different result. So found 6 inside array is false. So let's recap on what we have. An array is a list of numbers. They can be of different types, but right now we're looking at integers. We can pre-fill the array, or we could fill it with random numbers. It doesn't matter. Maybe someone else filled the array. We don't know. The array could be the football scores for Premier League for the last few years. It could be anything. We don't know. We can look at every item in that array with a for loop. And we can analyze each item in the array with an if statement. And we can determine things about it. So once you've gotten all that, we can start doing some very interesting things. We can start writing complex questions like, can you find the biggest value in the array? Can you find the smallest value in the array? Can you find if the largest value in the array and if it occurs more than once? Can you add up all the values in the array? Can you add up all the values until you reach a total and then tell us how many values you had to add to get to that total? I mean, you can come up with hundreds of these questions yourselves. And it's good practice to actually try and challenge yourself to figure out things just using lists. And you're using a very small number of programming concepts, believe it or not, but they're very important ones. And they're sort of the fundamental things that, a first-year college student studying coding for the first time should be very familiar with by the end of the year and get comfortable with. Now, let's do a few of those as a practice. And I'm going to pause now and we'll start with a clean page in a second.